Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for choosing to come along to this first workshop. I'm just here to do some introductions. So my name's Chris Orbutt, and I'm the Director of Programmes at Greenhouse Sports. And I've got a great job, actually, because I get to go around lots of schools in London and watch our programmes in action, which are some outstanding coaches working currently with about 6,500 young people. And I get to see some of that impact that our CEO, John, spoke about earlier in terms of the transformation in behaviour and emotional development of our young people in the schools. So firstly, if I introduce what's going to happen in the workshop today, we've got Dr. Caroline Mason from Loughborough University who's going to talk through the study that she and her team completed last year. Then Jason Sugrue, one of our coaches and our head of sports and coaching, is going to talk about the impact and action and stories from the coaches' perspective as well as the participants. Then there'll be some opportunity for direct questions for either Caroline or Jason. And then we're going to have some questions up on the wall for some discussion for you to then feed back to us in how we can move forward in this area of impact. As you may have heard earlier from John's presentation, Greenhouse Sports was established over 15 years ago and has worked with over 40,000 young people in London. Currently, we have full-time, high-quality coaching programmes delivering sport in over 50 programmes in over 40 schools in London. And they focus on specific sports. So one coach will focus on one sport, and they are basketball, table tennis, volleyball, and judo. And we only work with certain schools, and they're schools that have clear high proportions of deprivation, and the programmes themselves have a clear focus on extracurricular delivery, school intervention, enrichment, in order to sustain and have the goal of the desired impact. I'm now going to pass over to Dr. Caroline Mason from Loughborough University, who will talk about the impact and the findings of a recent study.
Hello, everybody. So everybody's shown a little bit about their personal background, so I feel obliged to do the same thing, to say that I am an academic. I put my hand up. I work at Loughborough University, and for the last 14 years I've been researching young people, sport and physical activity. My specialist area is now young people in disadvantaged communities, and that's what I'm absolutely passionate about. How can we make sport more inclusive for young people for whom there are a lot of barriers for them engaging in sport? So I've seen some fantastic programmes across the years, and I've seen some programmes that aren't so fantastic. So I do have a lot of experience going out, seeing young people doing these activities. So I just thought it was important to say that this isn't the only piece of research we've done, that this is very much built on 14 years of experience of what young people do, what they like to do, and what happens when they do it well. So that's Greenhouse Sports. You've already had a little bit of an introduction. Greenhouse, as I was already mentioned, they work in schools where young people don't have the best opportunities to engage in sport. And what Greenhouse Sports does is try and bring them a very special offer within their school environment. So the words to pick out there are high quality, intensive sports programmes. So these coaches are based full-time in the schools, and that, as far as I know, is quite a unique approach that sets Greenhouse Sports aside from other kinds of offers within school environments. So you've already had an introduction to the type of sports, and the coaches themselves are very highly qualified coaches. They're highly qualified in their sport. They're also highly qualified in terms of working with young people. And that, I would suggest later on, is a very, very powerful combination. So in terms of the research context, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the research context, but basically probably everybody in this room believes that sport has the power to deliver some fantastic outcomes for the young people who engage in it. However, it's very, very difficult to prove that in ways that policymakers want to engage with. So we, as researchers, have a very big challenge on our hands to try and capture the good work that sport does and make those messages meaningful for people who have the opportunity to make sure that more young people get more opportunities that meet their needs in the longer term. So what we would try to do with this piece of work is to try and address some of those issues that we face as researchers and try and look at what happens when you work with a specific kind of young person in a specific time of, kind of school in a specific time of kind of way. In particular, we undertook what we called a scoping study. So this was us really dipping our toe in the water of greenhouse sports and saying, okay, what is it that greenhouse do? What is it that they do well? What sort of impact are they having? And can we demonstrate that impact? So greenhouse sports already had a very good understanding of what they do and why they do it in the way that they do it. Fantastic monitoring and evaluation systems already in place, but they felt that perhaps they weren't recognising the full impact of these programmes, which they knew were very powerful for certain young people within those schools. So particularly, we were charged with, could we identify whether these people who engage in greenhouse sports, whether it made a difference to things that matter in school, attendance, behaviour and attainment. Was there any evidence to suggest that these programmes, which are targeted at young people who might be having difficulties in those areas, do these programmes make a difference to those things? And ultimately, if they do make a difference to these things, does that also lead to more positive outcomes in terms of their education and attainment? So what we decided to do was to focus in on 4 schools where we knew good things were happening and that there was an opportunity to be able to demonstrate these things if it was possible to demonstrate them. We therefore had a mixed method approach. We did some qualitative stuff, we did some quantitative stuff. So we talked to people, we talked to head teachers, PE staff, coaches, pupils, about what was happening, tell us all about the greenhouse sports programmes. In addition, we also got data from those schools. We got data about young people who had engaged in greenhouse sports, and we compared it with data for similar children who hadn't engaged in greenhouse sports within 3 of the 4 case study schools, to try and see, was there a difference in terms of those outcomes that I already mentioned. Our approach was peer-reviewed by Pro Bono Economics. They thought that what we'd done was a good, sound approach. And what we found was that, first of all, the stakeholders were very convinced that what Greenhouse did had value. In particular, they felt that the programmes were successful in developing transferable skills. So the things that you've already heard mentioned in terms of things that matter when children leave school, in terms of their qualifications, in terms of their confidence, in terms of their self-belief, their ability to communicate with others. General belief across the stakeholders, and that includes young people themselves, that these things were benefits of taking part in a greenhouse sports programme. We also found that the people we spoke to felt that the programmes were really important in terms of promoting children's positive mental health. We've already heard how much pressure young people are under, more now than ever before. And there was a general consensus that by, again, engaging with the coaches, who were very significant others to these young people, they were a sounding board. They could negotiate good relationships with teachers when things weren't going very well. They could talk to parents and actually say some very positive messages. Today, your child has achieved. Today, your child has done well, which may be messages that those parents don't often hear. So those kind of things are therefore impacting on young people's self-esteem. There are positive role models in school, and I'm talking about the coaches and the children who engage in the programmes. And then additionally, as well as positive mental health, opportunities for positive impact on physical health. Children were more active because they had more opportunities to be active. But not only in the short term, by having positive experiences of sport, the evidence shows, the broad evidence shows, that children who have greater physical literacy, greater confidence about engaging in sport, are more likely to be physically active in the longer term. And also, if they have positive experiences of sport, they're more likely to stay predisposed to sport. So there might be times in their lives when they don't do very much sport, when they're busy, when they're not very well, when they're doing their exams, but they still have this positive predisposition, they're more likely to come back to sport as adults. And again, our stakeholders in the programmes told us that that's what the programmes offered for the young people who engaged in these programmes. I've got a few of the quotes just to illustrate from the actual words of the stakeholders themselves. So this is head teachers. Head teachers actually have to fund these programmes, or at least partially fund the programmes. These teachers are under massive financial constraints where they have to choose, do they do this programme or do they fund another kind of service within schools which have seen their services decrease and decrease and decrease. This is why engagement, positive mental health, they believe it's well worth the money they spend on it. PE teachers, again, because the coaches work in partnership with PE teachers, they complement what's happening in school. They don't do more of the same, they do something different. And again, for that reason, the programmes are valued by the head teacher, by the PE staff themselves. We got the chance to speak to some former students. So these were students who'd been through Greenhouse, come out the other side. They were now in university. They were able to reflect back what it was like to be part of that Greenhouse programme when they were at school. It was fantastic to hear them talk about their experiences, to put their hands up about how naughty they'd been, how they challenged the coaches, how they'd gone to Wimbledon and decided to play hide and seek while the coach was looking for them. But they'd come out the other side, and now they were able to articulate what it was that they gained out of that experience, how the coaches helped them with their homework, how the coaches inspired them to stay involved in sport, how the coaches inspired them to go to university, how they feel now that they want to give back to sport as adults, that they want other children to have the same experiences that they had when they were in school. In terms of the quantitative findings, they were also far more positive, I think John's alluded to this, than we had initially hoped. Not because we doubted the outcomes, but because we doubted the ability for the data to support the outcomes. So the scoping study indicated that there was a difference between the students who hadn't participated in Greenhouse programmes compared to students who had. So this was really powerful because it demonstrates that these programmes are having an impact on attendance, behaviour, attainment. And ultimately, we know in terms of employability that getting your English and maths really matters in this day and age. The opportunities to retake your GCSEs are diminishing. People have to get them first time, ideally. So these things are really, really important. In terms of the key elements of the Greenhouse Sports approach, I know we're going to have another one of their coaches going to speak about this, but these were the elements that we felt were the things that Greenhouse does, that it does really well and that are absolutely intrinsic to the success of the programmes. So the coaches, I mentioned their high quality sport, but also their ability to work with young people. The structure of the programme is very different to any other. It's embedded, it's bespoke in that it's tailored to the needs of the school. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. And the fact that these opportunities are sustained, they're there every single day. They sometimes go into the school holidays, and they happen over years, not weeks or just days. Student-centred approach, the young people know that they are at the heart of the delivery. That delivery is for them. It's tailored to their needs. And the additional support that Greenhouse Sports offers as an organisation to their coaches. Their coaches are very well supported by the charity as a whole. The charity has a very clear vision about what it wants its coaches to be able to achieve and backs that up with actual support for coaches. So I'm hoping that that I was going to have similar... Oh yes, sorry, this is my and finally. No, sorry, I forgot about this slide. So, this is my challenge to everybody in the audience. Quite often we see sport as providing an important lifeline to young people who are facing challenges in their lives. And I think this is quite often is the model. We throw them the lifeline with the sport that we offer. I'm challenging people in the room to move away from that model and move more to something like this, where we have the right people, state-of-the-art equipment, and we go in with a mission to achieve a predetermined outcome. So that's my personal challenge for the day.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Great to be here. When I'm not coaching, I like talking about coaching, so this is probably a good place for me to be. I've been with Greenhouse, I think now for about 15 years, so since day dot. I was kind of trying to be an athlete at the time and got fairly good, but not as good as I would have liked. So I started coaching a little bit and found my true passion in the sport was actually coaching. I want to talk a little bit today about how we got to some of this evidence and what our programs look like. They are bespoke to each school, and I think that's a good place to start in terms of our partnerships. We are in partnership with our schools, and it's important that we get these partnerships right from the very beginning. We go in, we really find out how we can support the school around what they're looking for in terms of delivery of our programs, what sport works best, facilities, maybe the community around them. Within a local distance, do we have the right support network to keep the pathway going for how our young people can be engaged outside of our programs? So there's lots of thinking behind what we do firstly. And it's really important that we have our STEP model, which we haven't spoke too much about today, but we try and deliver around a model which is called STEP, which is social, thinking, emotional, and physical skills. And these are always at the front of all of our coaching and our training sessions that we do, especially in our mentoring. So we're trying to really take these young people on a journey that can support them going forward. Once we get the programs up and running and we find out how the school best wants the program to work, we have to get out there, we have to speak to the staff, engage with the staff first and foremost, get some buy-in for what we're doing, talk about how we're going to hopefully use our coaching methods and our sport to engage the pupils back into their lessons and maybe even support their education. So a lot of the stuff we do is built around the school curriculum and the curriculum delivery. So we're really trying to catch every single child and try and get them involved, even if they're not so keen on sport to start with, to see how I can use the sport in the curriculum. Then we have to have a lot of fun, which is the best part for coaches. So we try and really engage with the young people, get them coming into different types of sessions. So we do breakfast clubs, lunch clubs, after school clubs. There is extracurricular stuff on the holidays to try and get people in through the door. We might be table tennis or basketball coaches, but we try and engage in any way we can. We also try and go out and recruit one or two of those young people that maybe are completely disengaged, and you won't find them doing PE. They have a note every week for why they can't, and maybe a little conversation and taking them away from the PE group and doing more bespoke one-on-one sessions or small group sessions to engage them and get them thinking and maybe start building a little bit of a relationship, a bit of trust, and then through that, hopefully, in the long run, engaging them to, reintegrate into class or reintegrate into the big group stuff, and hopefully on the way, we get them engaged in the STEP model and what we're doing. The next bit is about culture and expectations. All professional coaches, very well qualified coaches, a lot of sort of athletes or high level performers that don't only think about high level performance, they're very much about the holistic approach and working with young people and how we can really use our sports and our passions to engage and help these young people that we work with. As it says, over the time we try and build up these relationships. Sometimes we go into curriculum lessons and support them and maybe sit with some of our participants to try and help them and find out why when we're in the staff room such and such teacher says this kid is an absolute nightmare. When they're with us they're as good as gold, and it's just about relationships. I'm sure we all remember one or two of our teachers that we found difficult to work with, or the subjects we didn't like, and then when we had a new teacher, all of a sudden we've got a passion for that subject. So it's about trying to use our sport and what we do to really capture the imagination and make sure that we support them through that journey. Obviously it takes time to build good relationships and a culture within some schools. I think our Greenhouse model and the way we train our staff, we're really much about having a strong culture. And sometimes a lot of our coaches go into schools where maybe our program structure and culture is stronger than that of the schools, just because they're challenging places to work. And we try and use that to not only engage with the young people, but support what the school are doing. And we buy into the school's mission statement and school's ethos. And it's a really, really important thing. But the most important thing with expectations and culture is to try and let the young people set those boundaries. So a lot of the time they're in school and they're told what to do. And we're very much from a different background. We're coaches and we're there really as probably someone they can trust a little bit more, a little bit differently. And it's about us using our imagination to help them build programs and expectations that support their needs. So for instance, if we have very, very high standards in terms of, if you're 1 minute late, you can't come into a session. Those things are great, but maybe in terms of a performance session. But if you're working with an engagement session where people just want to drop in, have a bit of fun, and you start setting these boundaries too high, then you're going to lose all those young people that want to come in or just want to have a bit of fun. So it's about finding the right structure, and through that, then we have different, I said we have breakfast, lunch, after school clubs. Maybe when you want to be a little bit more social and just get people playing, it's lunchtime. If we're talking about targeting athletes, because student athletes, because that's what they're so interested in, maybe that's when they come to before school sessions. So it's about having the expectations in terms of what they want to achieve rather than what they're being told what to do. That's a really powerful lesson that we've learned over our journey. Progression and pathways, talking about, so we hopefully try to have from absolute beginner fun sessions where we might not even focus so much around our sport, right up to national, maybe even international standards. We saw Nathan earlier, who's gone on to compete at a very high level, and throughout my 15 years within Greenhouse, we've had hundreds of national champions, which no one spoke about today, and we don't really want to talk about, because actually that's just a byproduct of what we're doing. And it's more about the journey and how we get there rather than actually the sporting success. We have, as it says up there, we've got lots of one-to-one sessions. So we go in, during the curriculum time, we might be able to take one or two students away from subjects where they're struggling or where they're allowed to come out of. And that's when we really start working on our STEP model, the social thinking, emotional and physical skills. And with that, we have another sort of way of capturing individual data. And through that process and through that journey, we help the young people set goals and what they want to improve, whether that be through communication, self-reflection, discipline. And we work on these things throughout a whole year. Focus groups and smaller groups that go through this whole process. Really, really powerful. And we've seen lots and lots and lots of really good impact on that. And most of those targets and goals are set by the young people, which makes it even more important. And then just our approach, the child, the student, the athlete. All of our young people call themselves, once they're within the program for a few years, student athletes. They know first and foremost that their education is at the front of what we're trying to do, but before the education, it's actually them. So if they come to our programs, we're very hopeful that once they go through the process, however long they are with us, that they've had a really, really good approach to sport and learning, that they can transfer and use these schools in different parts of their lives. All the coaches look to always build on young people's whole approach. First and foremost, make sure education is strong, so we communicate really well with the schools and how we can do that. And then the athlete bit, that they're probably the most interested when they take up the sport a little bit more seriously, is a sort of byproduct of what we're doing. Nice little quote at the bottom is one of the kids said to me. He said, "Sir, there's no microwave to success. It's a slow cooker," which I really like. And like I say, through the process, through working with us and through working in partnerships with the school, I'm really happy, really proud of the work we do. I love doing it. I could talk more and more and more in hours about an actual coaching session and how we work on these STEP skills, but feel free to grab me at any time and ask me any questions. I'll be here for a little while outside. But thanks very much for listening. Thank you.
I think Jason might have just undersold himself slightly in terms of his playing ability and as a coach, as an ex-international table tennis player. And also, how many players are currently in the British setup that you've coached?
Yeah,
quite a few. So he is an outstanding sportsman in his own right as well. Okay, I would like to give an opportunity now for some questions either to Caroline or to Jason regarding the research or the programme from a coach or participant perspective, or even from the school perspective in terms of our approach from the programme and the finances and things. So if there's any questions, now is your opportunity. We do have a microphone here. I don't know what the acoustics are like. Any questions? Blank status, yes.
Hi, thank you very much for that talk. It's really refreshing to see how evidence-based practice has been used, on the link with organisations, etc. I was just wondering, how do young people get to be part of this programme? Do they opt in themselves? Do they need an interest within sport? And how do you target those maybe girls who are not interested in sport or might go down the physical activity?
It's a really good question. The honest answer is it's a lot of hard work. You actually have to actively recruit, set up girls-only sessions, go out, talk, spend time in the playground. It's more about building relationships. I mean, schools are quite tough environments for young people, and when they see someone with maybe coach on the back and someone who's always smiling, and if I'm energetic and I'm vibrant and always trying to be positive, you find that people will come and try it. And it said earlier about friendship groups are really, really important. So maybe we get support from the PE staff as well. So, you know, the PE staff help you identify 1 or 2 students that are quite strong in sport. They come, they bring a group of friends, then maybe they might help you identify some that really struggle. And that's just around maybe just going and spending some time. And like I say, it's not always just about sport. We might just go in and sit down in a classroom. So we become a really familiar, friendly face. And I think, first and foremost, I think those are the ones you want to target. The ones that are already playing sport are the ones that are already playing sport. I mean, if we're actually doing a coaching model in terms of we want them to go through the STEP model, which is around about, we're looking between 5 and 10 hours a week. We want to spend time with young people to show our impact and how much work we're doing with them and how positive it is. So you probably don't want the ones that are already the best at football or the best at netball or the best at whatever. We actually specifically target those that are not already engaged. But it does take, I mean, the honest answer is it's not easy. It's hard work. It is time consuming. Hope that answers your question.
We have a very, Jason mentioned earlier about quite a bespoke approach depending on the school as well. So everything Jason just said, but also some schools have a very structured approach. So they might have a referral process from behaviour. Quite often in schools you'll find that the directors of learning or heads of year are ex-PE department or part of the PE department. So there's quite a strong link quite often with whoever might have the behavioural strategy or the progress and learning strategy with the senior leadership team. But also we market through the ways Jason just explained, but also we'll run a curricular time in year 7, year 8, year 9. So they'll do a 6-week programme which then will encourage participation in the enrichment time in the school. Good question, thank you. Yes, so we go first.
I'm really interested in the research, so thank you for that presentation. In your introduction, you gave a summary of one of the difficulties in this area, which I think most of us appreciate, of establishing a causal relationship rather than just an association. And if my question really follows on from people or children, maybe in some schools, opting into this. So I wondered if you could explain how you think your research shows that causal relationship in terms of an impact of what in academia we can impact rather than just an association, was the first part. The second part was, how do you know it's a product of the actual, in terms of the educational attainment of the programme rather than just extra time spent with that child?
Okay, so those are very good questions. In terms of the causality, we haven't demonstrated that yet. So that was phase 1 of the research. We are now going to do a more extended piece of research with Greenhouse Sports again, where we're looking at more schools and we're looking at more factors, so more factors about the school, more factors about the children. And we are trying to also look into whether to what extent are the young people self-selecting into the sport and which ones are more being included through these other ways. So they're not actually typical self-selectors. So there are some children within the Greenhouse Sports who do as much sport as you can possibly give them. Others, it's this slowly trickle. They are not self-selectors in a typical way that we would think about sport. So we haven't done it yet. Hopefully this next year that is going to be the focus, to try and make the causality clearer. The second question was about, is it about the sport or is it about the relationship?
In terms of the academic attainment, given the evidence out there, not so much for school dinners but for breakfast clubs, and some of the argument being around there, it's not actually the nutrition in terms of glycemic load to the brain but just time spent.
I think that is a bigger challenge for us, absolutely. And I'm not sure that we've 100% been able to demonstrate that. But again, this time we're looking at different kinds of engagement. So last time it was, do they engage or don't they engage? This time we're looking at why do they engage and how long do they engage for. So in theory we'll be able to see that if they do more sport, does that make a difference to their outcomes, or is it just engagement with the programme itself that makes a difference?
Last question.
Yes.
So are you thinking of running like an RCT or step wedge design
We are going to hopefully be comparing to schools where there is no greenhouse sports, where there is a relationship with the charity, but the programmes aren't actually running, so they will be the control. So there's an intra-school with students who don't do it, and then across school with schools that aren't involved in the programme. So yes, we are.
Yes.
It's not as hard as that question, by the way. Just out of obviously the success of this, the role of the coach basically is critical, isn't it, to the success of this programme. So I was just wondering what type of initial training do you do with the coaches, and do you do any development for the coaches that are actually carrying out this work?
Our recruitment of coaches is quite important because it's not purely about the level of sport or their qualification or experience. It's very much about the kind of person. So it has to be the right person to engage with the young people, as well as have the ability and skills to coach the sport in question, which Jason alluded to with all the relationship building. In terms of, we do have our CPD structure. We have, in my opinion, coming from education, I was a PE teacher, head teacher previously. There's a very rigorous, robust induction process in everything you would expect, safeguarding, health and safety, etc. But there's also CPD structure on the development of the coach. That could be in mentoring, child development, for example. Jason, is there other particular training that, in your experience of the 15 years?
I think probably, actually, the best training we'll do is working together, if I'm honest with you. I mean, we spend a lot of time together as coaches, especially during the holiday period, or we get a couple of days every couple of months maybe to go out and look at other programs and talk to coaches and really just share and practice. Not because every school is completely different to how they run. So it's more important that our coaches have a really good support network in terms of the coaches. So there's a lot of training done, not always on courses, but just learning, peer learning, working together. I mean, that's probably the most valuable in all my time at Greenhouse, is just working with other coaches.
It's good that you've got that opportunity, isn't it? Because a lot of people who work out schools can be very isolated.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So actually working together and sharing good practice.
Yeah, it's hugely important, and it's something we've done for a long time and continue to do.
So during the holiday programmes that Jason mentions, the summer camp, Easter camps, and the half terms as well, there will be at least one day in that half term, for example, where all the coaches will meet together, and they'll also meet within their teams, which is the opportunity for technical as well as some of the wider skills that we need the coaches to have. And the way we work and the model we're developing is what you might expect to see in a school, where you look at developmental needs and you match that with the experience and skills and competencies that you have within 60 highly proficient coaches, where they can lead workshop styles. And a good example of that is in our SEN programs. We're in 7 SEN schools. We have members of staff that can go and work with mainstream coaches to help with differentiation and delivery, coping with behaviour management or autism in the group that they're working with. So we try and have that approach you might expect to see in a school. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, two things. In terms of how you engage with schools initially, does that come from you, or does that come from the school? And also, do you target the schools that you think can benefit most from it? And also, from the school's point of view, what barriers have you faced when it comes to working with new schools, and how have you overcome them?
So in terms of growth of schools, it's interesting. John said right at the beginning of his presentation that we're maybe not widely known. And I think over the last 15 years, there's been a lot of organic growth. At the same time, there's an interesting barrier in that we fund 2/3 roughly of the cost of the programme, which can be up to £50,000 in a school, and that's from our own fundraising and our corporate partners. So therefore, there's a natural barrier in terms of growth, really. We also find that many schools have tight budgets, but because of the nature of the school we will work with, which are targeted on the Adaki scores of 67% or more, there will be pupil premium pots that the school will use as an intervention, and they'll widely will have to show that on their website. So this sort of lends into the school data that Caroline was talking about as well, with our focused group of students that we work with. We have recently gone out more to try and get growth, because we've been working with Sport England to grow the number of schools that we work with. And actually that's been a fairly easy journey when we've approached the right schools, so that the ones I mentioned that have the right number of students that are living in deprivation, schools that also recognise a variety of interventions, including sport, and have the right facilities to be able to have the coaching that we need, because they need to have the right space. We will provide a lot of equipment, but they need to have the right space for us to work in as well. So there's been, in terms of growth, there's been a organic side and also specifically targeting certain schools through the schools we know through our work in the last 15 years would be a good school to work with. There was one other question, yes.
Two-part question, yes. The first thing is, what's your sort of typical time scale of the relationship between you guys and the school? Is it a one-year programme? Is it longer? Does it change?
The first part of that is a 3-year contract initially, although it's up for review and development at the end of each year. But we've had schools that have been with us for most of our journey so far, and we've got schools that are literally starting in the next couple of weeks. So there is a variety. Schools tend to stay with us because they, as John again said in his presentation, when I go and meet head teachers, they can't say enough positive things about the programme. All of that narrative that we know works in sport, that's what they'll talk to us about. And the fact that our impact team, led by Katie here, can demonstrate the impact we have with our students, and then a robust study like Loughborough University only go to help maintain that relationship. The only times that the programme may close is been when schools' budgets have been so tight that they just have to make decisions between a maths teacher and one of our programmes, which is a awful position to be in, because the head teachers know how valuable the programme is. But on the whole, they do everything they can to stay with us.
And what would you sort of say that your success criteria is for the programme? What would you define that?
That's interesting, because there is a core need for the programme to work. So we do set parameters within the contract, but as Jason mentioned, there is flexibility because of the need of the school. So we lay out that we want to limit the amount of curricular time. Our coaches aren't a spare PE teacher. What they do is very unique, and to have the impact, they have to have the time to do that. But we do find that some schools tend to encroach a little bit on that. And because our coach is an integral part of the school, not only the whole school, but particularly the PE department, they do tend to help out if needs be and needs must. So we do find that we have to sometimes remind schools of what the impact that they want, they're paying for, needs to follow our programme, so they can't go off piste too much in terms of our curriculum time. And also the link to the first question about working with the right types of students, using it as a pathway to performance in the trophy cabinet, is great for marketing, but it doesn't necessarily reach the right students and therefore has the right impact. So we sometimes have to remind schools that they need to look at specific students that maybe aren't already involved in sport, maybe their behaviour and therefore progress or attendance isn't quite right. So therefore encourage them to come onto our programme, onto what we call the Perry sessions, one-to-one small group work, so we can start to engage them into the bigger group enrichment programme. So it's to answer that second question, our programme managers that work closely with the schools and our impact team, it's important there's communication so that we target the right population of students. Does that answer your question? Yeah, great. So I'm looking at the time. I think we're slightly over time. We did have some questions to try and stimulate a little bit of discussion, but I don't think we've got time. So what would be good is for you to take those thoughts away with you in terms of where we go in the sector and in terms of showing impact, particularly towards policy, change, funding from government, particularly in schools, so that sport is more of a focus for the changes and the development we know it can make. So have a quick photo of those questions, have a quick read through, and please take those away with you for how to take this forwards.
In your delegate pack, there's a business plan with impact at addressing this. So if you do want to get in touch with Greenhouse, particularly the impact in mind, very willing to hear from anyone that's in here.
Okay, thank you very much and enjoy your lunch.